Welcome to the Breaking Uneven podcast. We usually kick off by saying we love to play a few games, uncover the beauty of failures, etc. But this isn't an episode with a guest. This is just the two of us. Breaking Uneven started out virtually. We did 40 episodes virtually with more than 40 entrepreneurs. And we thought it would be a good idea to kind of talk about a takeaway from each of them, each of the episodes, that is. So, what did we actually get from doing that? And hopefully, the people who watched it took away some of the same things, some different things.
There were definitely more than one learning from every episode, but I think we want to summarize and highlight one key one from each one of them so that I guess you all don't need to watch all 40.
No, you still need to watch all 40. But I guess what we're doing is just taking it and putting it into our context, because our contexts are also quite different. Just like what it is that we took away.
And it's not, some of them are not necessarily explicitly from the guests, but are learning from it, or like
it might not be something that the guest said, but just what we took from it. So who do we start with?
We started with Aditi.
Right. Canonic.
That was our first episode. It was a while back because we recorded that much before we actually uploaded that.
Would have been more than a year ago.
Maybe just about a year
ago. Yeah. That's crazy.
I can't believe we've come so far. Like a year ago, we were recording on 9 and
the fact that we've uploaded 40 episodes consistently, week after week, Sunday, 4:30 p.m. IST. That's good enough to be, that's something to be proud of. And hopefully it continues from here.
What she said was, like there is product market fit, there is also founder market fit in today's day. And I found that to be really interesting because she said that investors look for the best founder instead of the best product. And I think that was also repeated over multiple episodes later. But I think that was really key in the idea. Like a lot of people focus on the idea you have when they want to raise funding, but that's not as important as the kind of person or the kind of founder you're going to be, because a lot of investors look at that, like who they want to work with versus what your idea is. And I think across the 40 episodes we've also learned that majority of them pivot so much, so it's never just the idea. That I found, like the way she also put it up, being like a founder market fit, I think that was really interesting.
Oh no, 100%. I think Aditi was amazing first episode to begin with. And next we had James Lowe of Mana, and so we've split this up, alternate episodes between Janvi and I. And I think James was one of the people that I really hoped I'd get to do learning from, because he spoke about this thing called the entrepreneur trap, and that has changed my life. I've told everyone in my family about it. I've told a lot of friends who are founders about it, and it applies to any kind of entrepreneur. And the point is, when you have an idea, you have the idea because you've got some particular insight or the ability to build something that no one else does, ideally, or the ability to build it in a different way than other people are doing it. But when you describe your idea to people before it's at concept stage, you're describing your ideal scenario. The person you're speaking to is imagining their ideal scenario. And then then you just go and build it. But what you've described and what they imagined is not the same. And he spoke about creating feedback loops, etc. And I think this applies whether you're doing tech or even let's say you're doing toothpaste, doesn't matter. It still it still applies. And that's just changed the way I think altogether.
Yeah, I think his episode overall, we were mind blown in many aspects of it.
Yeah.
Because again, he spoke about really tangible things. I think it was even when it was about quitting your job or whatever, he gave 3 bullet points.
Yeah.
He'd be this is what you do. Or whether it was this, it was not in the air, but more objective, I guess, or making subjective things more objective, which I think I appreciated a lot.
No, 100%.
The next person we had was Jayan from Vital, and through his episode, he said that you don't need to, or like what we gathered, I guess, was like you don't need to have a brand figured out on day one. It's very much growing, adapting, and evolving as the company grows. And one other interesting thing in the brand space was that now employees care about what the company stands for, because he was asked by an interviewee what Vital stands for and what Vital's brand stands for. And that's, I guess, when he said that it's ever growing and evolving. And they're trying to find out as well. So I think that was also interesting. I feel like sometimes when you're trying to be a perfectionist, you try to have everything ready for day one. But it's important to, I guess, realize that that's not possible when it comes to building a business. There's a lot of growth that continues. And also now, I think back in the day, people just cared about having a job. Now, people want to associate with the company that they are part of.
You say people, I think it's Gen Z. Yeah. And Gen Z is like,
I guess they are the new workforce.
Yeah, and I think it's a two-sided coin. So they are more, they do think about, who they're associating with and like the culture of the workplace and everything like that. But I think, and Gen Z are generally more like inclined to attack someone if there's, a misstep or any kind of wrongdoing. But at the same time, Gen Z is also like quite forgiving. So it's more like, hey, be transparent, you mess up, that's fine, but like also own up to it and then it's all good. So I think, that is, how I view the evolutionary brand process. And then we had Vaishnavi, who, to be honest, the like sole thing I remember from her episode, because again, it's definitely more than 6 months ago, is that she started out with like 1 lakh. 1 lakh rupees, which is, to be honest, really not that much. And now everything she's done since then has just been a recycling of that revenue, of the revenue she got by putting in that 1 lakh. And so the basic takeaway, I don't even want to elaborate on it, is recycling revenue can really go a long way.
Yeah, because again, I think we recorded this episode maybe like a year ago. And if you see where Bala is right now, like they've accomplished quite a lot.
Yeah.
So if it's still like based on that 1 lakh that was initially invested, even in like that 1 year, because I think maybe she would have started a year or two, so maybe like 2 or 3 years in total. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a bootstrap business. You talk about raising, like, people talk about raising investment of 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs. Then you have like 5 crores, 10 crores, 150 crores. I mean, we've had a founder who's raised 150 crores. You talk about all that and think about 1 lakh is what Vaishnavi started with. That's insane.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, so back to the idea of like brand and how it's evolving. I think Annika showed how that is in reality. So she started her podcast and it was called The Woke Desi. She didn't necessarily like the name back then, but like her team liked it. So she was outvoted. And even after getting a lot of traction, they were able to change the name to that Desi Spark. And I think one or maybe like me, like I would think that's difficult to do later down the line because people associate what you do to your brand, your logo and everything. But she was able to do that amazingly in the way that, it's just a reminder that like the start of your brand is not the be all. It is ever growing, it is changing, and people will adapt to that and people will respond to that as well. So again, nothing's fixed in stone.
Yeah, and what's more evolutionary, like there's one side is your business brand and then there's the personal brand side, and that's obviously evolving because you don't stop evolving as a person. And that's, I think, what I took away from Anish's episode, which was like, what does your personal brand mean for your business? And I can't, to be honest, remember whether we spoke about it, but Anish has a podcast and he has a huge personal brand. By the way, when we spoke to him, I think he was around 20,000 followers. Today he's at like 80, I think. So yeah, obviously his personal brand makes a big difference. And everyone knows him as the founder of Swami, and he does like these really cool lifestyle things. So it kind of makes me think of, why did Kingfisher take off, right? It was the king of good times and stuff like that. That was Vijay Mallya's personal brand. So like anyone who bought a Kingfisher beer or like flew in the airplane did that because they kind of wanted to get in on that lifestyle. So yeah, it's just like a random thing that came to my head when I was thinking of Anish's episode.
No, for sure. And I think this again, I know you gave Kingfisher as an example, but I think associating personal brand with what you're building is also a Gen Z thing to a certain extent. A lot of people now want to share their like entrepreneurial journey online or share more of what they're doing, and people then get attached to like the story versus just the product, because a lot of people then will buy it because they've known how much hard work's gone into it. So I think that is also a Gen Z spin to a certain extent, but I also think I mean, it is definitely possible to not have a personal brand and also do something, but Anish did a really good job of having that personal brand. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people nowadays are doing that. Just, I guess, I don't know, is it to attract people to the story?
I think it's just from a PR perspective. Like,
do you think that's why people also come on podcasts to share their journey?
I think a couple of our guests have told us. I think even Ali and Mac, they specifically said like, we'll get visibility from this. And I don't know, because the thing is, the best way for a brand to tell its story is for the founder to do so, because it's their like baby. And to that, I would say like, yeah, I guess personal brand does matter, but again, it's the way you look at it. There are a lot of founders out there who don't. In fact, there's a lot of founders out there who don't want their personal brand to be associated because they want the company to run on its own. And I think we're going to get to that like later.
But yeah, so our next episode was with Gautum and PG. So Gautum mentioned that Talented pays interviewees for their time in completing tasks and completing the interview process. So they're given projects, and Talented pays them for that. It is also a reflection of how you will be treated later on in the company. So his thought was that the way you interview and the way you treat people at the interview stage is what reflects afterwards once you're hired. I think it was really incredible how Talented pays their interviewees to do their task. Like, I don't remember, like we both have done a lot of interviews back in London, and I don't think I was paid for any. I mean, given there was definitely a difference between completing a project versus like aptitude tests and interviews that we had to do. But even in London, I haven't heard anyone getting paid for any kind of interview they've done. So I think it is still new in the market.
Yeah, I mean, if we had even gotten like £100 per interview, like per application, we would have earned more than we did in the summer internship. So like, there is a huge, like it is a lot of like, time requirement and everything. And what it says about, in fact, Talented and Gautum and PG as founders is that they value people's time. That's what's at the core of it.
Okay, yeah. So, and the other thing that PG said was that there are two kinds of companies that pay really well. Companies with good culture and companies with bad culture. So there is either shut up money or speak up money. And I think the way he put that was amazing. Like, I think it is like mutually exclusive. Like, I don't think that it's any either or there's any gray situation in that, because we do know companies that pay really well, but their culture is absolute trash.
Yeah.
Their working hours are insane. They justify those bad hours by paying you more, or that bad culture by paying you more. Like, that's shut up money. And then there are companies, very few at that pay good but have great culture.
Yeah.
That treat the employees well, that give benefits, that give a work-life balance, that is able to do that. So again, I think for Talented as a whole, work culture was very important. It was reflected in both like the interview part of things before you're hired, and then even after. They were quite adamant on paying people above the average there is. So I think overall, I think they've really nailed the work culture bit.
Yeah, and the thing with Talented is they're trying to change the entire industry itself. Like I met Gautum recently, and he did tell me that like, they have a minimum pay rate which is well above market rate for even like even early careers professionals. Then other than that, they have like this entire handbook, like the Talented handbook / playbook, which they've released. Like it's on LinkedIn, it's on their website, you can access it, and it's just about how they are, like what the culture is, so that other companies can like mimic it. But yeah, let's come to the next episode, which was with Richard of Mava, and I think this to me is the first time I've ever heard this, which was that you can find a co-founder, you don't need one to begin with. So like I always assume that a co-founder is someone you had the idea with or around, or someone you first spoke to about the idea and then they added on to it. I could never think that you have the idea, you're ready to build it, and then you find someone to build it with you. That just never sat right with me. But I think to a certain extent, it's also what happened with James, and then with one more guest, which I can't seem to remember. But yeah, like that was just completely baffling to me.
Akanksha and Caitlin, I think.
Kind of. She had before. I think no, they just wanted to build something together. Yeah. I don't think Akanksha had the idea yet.
Yeah, but I think she had like the YC part of things. Yeah. Like she got into YC before.
Yeah, she knew she wanted to build with Caitlin. That's true.
Yeah, I think that is incredible. And I think that also helps you find the right person, right? Like if you just speak to someone and I guess have the idea with, you're not necessarily complementing each other in terms of skills. But when you're actively going and looking for a co-founder, then you're going to try and find someone that works with you well and balances you out. So I think that was, an interesting takeaway from getting a co-founder later in the process versus earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, then moving on to our next episode, which was with the founder of Subco, Rahul Reddy. I think when you try to start something, everyone has to do market research. You generally also start on a local basis, whether, for example, it's building something in India, it's whether India has the capacity, whether India has the market for it. You do your SWOT analysis. He said he did none of that because he knew he wanted to grow a global brand, which was so interesting because, that makes sense, right? Like if you want to grow global, why are you looking at your local stats? You have to see what the world has capacity for versus what India has capacity for. And it was particularly interesting given that his was not an online product or an online service. It was a coffee shop in Mumbai. So technically his local shouldn't have been India either. It should have been Mumbai. It should have been even more niche than that, like to the area that he was going to start his first shop at. So it was really interesting to see that from someone who, that he didn't even consider looking at a local analysis or market research, and he just looked at the global scale. And it'll be interesting to see how like Subco grows to that global scale.
Yeah, I think like they have grown a lot since the time that we spoke to Rahul. They've launched chocolates, they've done quite a few events and pop-ups, and now they're on Zomato, maybe Swiggy, I don't know. But with Rahul, like after Rahul, we also spoke to we did a design-led episode. So what happens when you build a design-led brand with Rahul, his photographer / brand manager, Jeff Nelson, Aniruddh Mehta, the big fat minimalist, and Nupur, who's the founder of a company called Kyona. And I think my takeaway from that episode was, so Aniruddh mentioned that respect how design can be integrated into a brand. Like he said that Rahul has that respect. And so Aniruddh is the designer for like Subco's branding and all the packaging and everything they do even today. And the point is, if you put aside the design side of it and the context of it, it is why do you choose to work with the partners that you work with? So it's a choice you're making, and it's not once, it's every day. So you need to respect that choice or like choose differently. I think that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, and I feel like when people are starting on and you have restrictive budgets, sometimes people don't put that much money into design because they think it can evolve. But the importance was that design is really important in starting a company. And I think that's what he, also meant from how Rahul respects design. Like he gave it enough importance to it from the very beginning because he knew that it's going to make a difference in how the brand's going to grow. Yeah. And I feel like not every company goes. And I think that's why our episode was more on like building a design-led brand, because a lot of times people want to build that much later on when they do have the budgets and focus more on their product versus service.
Yeah, 100%.
Then we had Heinrich on from Foam Learning. He has a YouTube channel, so go check that out. He gives a lot of tips for consulting and to be part of like the corporate world. A lot of the founders we've had on board had a corporate life before they started. And I think a lot of them were also consultants to a certain extent. So I think it was really interesting of what he said, that what you get from consulting is not necessarily just the work, but the transferable skills that you learn from it. And I think a lot of them may have used the skills that they gain from their experience as a consultant to then build what they've built now. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessary, but I think that's the way Heinrich also put it up, being like, yeah, like fair enough, the work in consulting can get a little tedious or can get a little monotonous at the end when it gets repetitive in terms of what you're doing. But at the end of the day, it's not what you're actually doing. It's the skills that you're gaining from doing all of those things. So yeah, that was interesting to me.
Yeah, I think for me, like what stood out to me from Heinrich's episode was just the fluidity of everything. I think he's done like a lot of different things, and he's gone from like consulting to hosting a YouTube channel to or like an entire firm learning across all socials. It's a platform in itself.
Yeah.
Now he's working in the real estate sector. So yeah, like it's all the transferable. Like that just shows the transferability of.
Because he's also worked across a lot of industries, and he was able to do that through that. Yeah.
Then we had Sameer and Yash, who are the founders of Hunger Inc. If you don't know what Hunger Inc. is, that's Bombay Sweet Shop, Veronica's, Entu Cutlet Magazine, O Pedro, and Bombay Canteen. I think I've got everything in there. But yeah, Sameer spoke about the continuity of talent in the company. And to be honest, I think that's something I struggled with in like at Curious as well, which is, so they had Chef Floyd, and obviously like an F&B brand, a restaurant business is really led by the chef. And so they had Chef Floyd, then Chef David, then Chef Hussain. So they've switched it up a lot, and they've done that like seamlessly. I don't even think an average customer knows that that's what's happened. And yeah, he told us about the way they do it, which is to have like a bench and then like also people continuously on it. And then by the time the people that are on it, want to leave or something, the people on the bench are like ready to just pick up right where they left off. So there's a slight cost to it. But I think that the main benefit is that your business just continues like it did from day one and has like that steady organic growth.
Yeah, and the analogy, like the sports analogy is really cool as well, like how you related that. And also, I think not a lot of people think of the continuity part from day one. And I think they did a really good job of starting from day one. Like it's not like they had an incident and then realized that they should. They've done it since the beginning.
Yeah. And when the incident happened, I guess that's when they first saw the benefit of it and then just stuck to it. And it's kind of linked to what Yash said, which was that like, how can your company run without you? So like continuity of talent is not just for the like employees, it's also for the founders. So like, and I think we brought this out in Red Flags quite a bit. What happens if one of the founders or the founder has to leave the firm? Would it still run? So is it a founder-led business or not? Which again, we'll come back to a little later.
Yeah, a lot of people said that they want to have that differentiation as well. And I think, like you said, it was Yash who said that I want this to run without me as well. Oh,
yeah, he also gave the analogy of his father, who's a neurosurgeon, who spoke about like
he needs to physically be there for it.
Yeah, he compared himself to like a taxi driver. Like a taxi driver, the meter doesn't run unless he's driving it. So to what extent does that business work without him? In the case of the taxi driver, zero. Which was just like a thought-provoking idea. He didn't actually give anything after that. Like he didn't say how that relates to him. This is just like what I took from it.
Yeah, I think he was putting the taxi driver more of like the business point of view. Yeah. I think he was like, okay, like when there's a taxi driver, he has to be there for him to earn money. Whereas so that's like similar to, I guess, an employee, you have to put in those hours to make that money. But if it is, if you have your own business, you are ideally making money when you're not working. It's not related to your hours. Yeah. Initially, it definitely is, but I think the long-term goal is that, okay, you're making money while you're sleeping. So then we had Supriya on, she was the producer of Bad Boy Billionaires Got Out, and like even now, like the AP Dylan one. So she's done some amazing work. But I think throughout her episode, her passion was incredible. And I think that was something that I took out. Like, she made it very explicit that when you're truly passionate about an idea, you are eating, breathing, sleeping that. And she took it even further to like the operation theater when she was giving birth.
Yeah.
So I think that was, I don't think I've ever seen passions like so vividly than anyone else. And I think it's like something to aspire to be. It's like, okay, like hopefully one day I have an idea that I'm so passionate towards that I am doing all of that. And I mean, there is also some level of toxicity to it in the sense that you can't breathe, eat, and sleep with like that idea. But it's like, I guess the metaphor is that when you're obsessed with something, you're only thinking about that and how to grow that. So yeah, having that, I guess, is.
Yeah, and to be honest, even the next episode with Sanjana, like that energy and that passion was still there. And in fact, what you said about like, you can't let it get toxic, which is like you eat, breathe, sleep the idea.
Yeah.
So from Sanjana's episode, like this, what I took away mainly was not as much of a learning, but like kind of like a kindred spirit feeling, which was that she spoke about feeling guilty whenever she takes time off. And that's like something I feel like I haven't taken time off in forever. And that's only because like even on Sundays I feel guilty because of whatever one does on a Sunday to relax. So yeah, I think that's again about the point where like your idea or your passion or your dedication to your work is toxic.
Yeah, I think this is like an entire, maybe not an entire episode, but an entire conversation altogether. It's like, where do you draw the line, right? Like, it's, you're clearly not giving yourself enough time or to be able to refresh or like to rethink what's next or to like grow. You're like to a certain extent going towards like, by you, I don't mean you specifically, but just in general, like towards like burnout when you're like working every second. So what is that balance when it comes to being an entrepreneur? Like, where do you draw the line? We've seen people
all over the place.
No,
I think we've seen like the entire range. Ideally, I think not ideally, but like generalistically with the guests that we've had, it's been more with like burnout and like toxicity and not like time off.
I think another thing common between, I guess, Sanjana and Shravil, who was our next guest, was also like, like dedication and persistence, right? Like they were on it in terms of trying to build their company. They were quite adamant on starting what they wanted to. I think like Sanjana also had like difficulties in terms of, I think there was like COVID when she wanted to launch, and this was like in-person workout sessions. So like that was like the hurdle she had to cross. And I think for Shravil, persistence was like key, and like not giving up was important because he spoke to 150 food scientists.
Yeah, that was insane.
Before he found the one. And like, I think that dedication is like insane. So I think when you truly, again, believe in something, it's important to like push through and like try and find, and I guess not settle. Because he could have, like, when you reach 100, you can be like, okay, like, this is the best I'm getting.
Like the 40th person I spoke to was good enough. I'll just go with that.
But like pushing through and being like, no, I'm gonna find the one or the person that I really want to partner up with or be in business with. He pushed through to like 151 and like found the person. So again, I feel like when there is a hurdle or a bump, it's important to make sure that you go over it rather than settling for something that you're not happy with.
Yeah. And then like, so coming to Swapan, who is the co-founder of Haptech, one of the things he spoke about was when he was in a job, he spread his wings wide and like he did a bunch of different, like he took on a bunch of different responsibilities, which then put him eventually at the right place at the right time. To me, that is something that I think applies to any kind of role you might play, whether you're a founder, employee, whatever it might be. The more responsibility you take, the more like you spread your wings in different directions. I think, the idea of something clicking is higher. And that's what I kind of took away from that episode.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then it was Ananya, the founder or the co-founder of Full Circle. What she said that was really interesting, and I think more coming from her, given that she is working in the mental well-being space. She said that there was always room for error when you're building your company authentically and you're building your company honestly. Um, when you show the good and the bad to your team in-house and the people, the consumers, they respect what you're building and then they give you space to make those mistakes. And I think, again, I think this was a topic of conversation with her, given that she was building something in a very important space, which you would assume has minimal room for error. She said that it doesn't differ for her as much, given that she built so authentically. So I think that was really interesting. That, again, given how cancel culture is right now, I think it's important to remember that if you are doing something with the correct intentions and are showing that, people will forgive and people will move on from that, um, regardless of what that error is.
And that's what we're talking about, like Gen Z, and like people are forgiving. Like show the error, own up to it, move on. Like I think that's just the way the world works.
Yeah. And another thing she actually spoke about was relationships between co-founders. And a funny thing she said was, it's a marriage with no divorce clause. And I found that really funny, but it is true, right? Like you fight with, or you have arguments with your co-founder. There are disagreements. You don't necessarily agree on every aspect of it, but like at the end, your goal is the same. And like that's important, like where you're on the same page for that. So it's how to navigate, how to get over things quicker and how to get over things, because there's no out, there's no divorce, there's no ending that relationship. So how do you grow that kind of relationship? And I thought that was really funny because she, like, I think she was also very extreme with certain things. She was like, yeah, like we could want to kill each other, but at the end of the day, like it's all on the same page. So like, yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, I agree. Coming to Kenish, I think this was like easily the most important thing for me, which was cold calling. So I hate it. I do it, but I absolutely hate it, and I don't always see the value. But Kenish said that, like, you know, it's the only way to really build a business. And to me, it just kind of gave me the feeling that, okay, you know, other people have seen value from it, because cold calling is something, it's like a numbers game. You'll see the value in like 1 out of 100 calls. So just seeing that, okay, other people also believe in it made me feel like, okay, when I do it, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing with Kenish was also like there are few people that like have that you can see like business is literally in their blood, because like he used to deliver groceries, like, you know, it was just like tiny things like that, like it was just in him to do something of his own. So like that, I think was very like evident in him versus like a couple of others that we've seen. And then moving on to Ahana, who was the founder of Clio, she said something really interesting in the sense, like, we all know about direct to consumer. She said there's direct to community. And now in this day and age, community is probably the most effective way to sell your products. Because again, like I think that also links back to like the brand part of things, right? Like when people associate with a certain brand, they're more likely to buy that product. So again, when someone associates themselves to be part of that community, if that community is buying that product, they're more likely to. So I think that was really cool to see how like it's transitioning in the way like people are selling their products. And another thing was it's really important to speak to your consumers before you build the product. See whether there's actual demand for it versus building it after and then there are no consumers for it. So I think like she said that for 3 months she literally spoke to people day in and day out to see whether people would actually buy what she's wanting to build, and then they had to pivot. So it was interesting to see how that worked.
Yeah, I think what I took away from Ahana's episode was the fact that she was solving a problem that she herself was facing, which to me is like, you know, as if you are inherently a founder, ideally, or like an entrepreneur, you have like 10 ideas in the back of your mind at all times, because those are the 10 problems you face in your daily life, and you have an idea on how to solve it, you just don't have the time. And then you build one idea, let it run itself, build another. Like, that is what an entrepreneur, or at least my goal is, like, to solve all of those ideas that keep coming up in my head. Coming to Sajal, photographer, founder of Epiphany. So first, before I get to like my actual learning, I think he is again one of those people where, even as a founder of a photography like company where he is the main photographer, Epiphany still runs without him. Like, that to me is like wild. Like, Epiphany is built on his personal brand because he is skilled, but he's turned it into something that can run without him. They take on projects where he himself isn't going. And we're going to come back to this yet again later. But what I did take away from him was like, enjoy the everyday. So like, he has worked with Rajasthan Royals. He's worked on a Hollywood film. Again, both times he was staying in like really nice places with the people like he was working with. And his work itself is so exciting that he doesn't have like a constant need for a break looming in his head. He travels a lot, and like, that's what gives him excitement. I'm not saying that's what gives everyone excitement, but it was just like, make the everyday exciting so that you don't have like some kind of growing need for a break inside of you.
Yeah, I guess that's where the balance is, right? Like, it's like, okay, you make every day exciting where you don't reach either stage of burnout, but you also don't need a break every couple of months. So it's like finding that, like, it's really hard. I don't know how people do it, but like, that's, I guess, the eventual goal. But if we then move on to Hamish, something that he said, and I think was also across a couple of episodes, was that investors want to hear the good and the bad. You don't need to only go to your investor when you have something exciting or something good that your company is doing. They are there to be part of all of it. They're there to help you come out of the bad. So it's not something that you should hide from your investors, but instead go to them for the resources, because they have a lot to help you with, and a lot of things that they can also give from their experience. So I think that was really interesting, because a lot of people might think that investors also only want to hear the good and want to not necessarily, or they would be angry about the bad, but it's not true.
Yeah, I think like, as you said, right, investors invest in the founder, so they want to know like everything that's happening. And speaking of investors, and again, this is a recurring theme I think we've seen, but like Murray, who has co-founded the company called Tally, which is a form builder, said that just because you can raise money doesn't mean you should. And that came more from like, so she imbibed that because of her co-founder, who has raised before and like has had a bad experience. But again, take Balav as an example. Don't need to raise money. Take Tally. They, I think, a year and a half into it, had reached a point where they were earning more through Tally than they both did. Both the co-founders did at their jobs. So yeah, I mean, raising money, I think, is just a boost, but they're doing perfectly fine even without raising money. So yeah, just because you can raise money doesn't mean you should.
I think raising money is also really dependent on the kind of founder you are. I feel like a lot of founders, at least like from what I've seen and the people that I've spoken to, there are a few that think of raising to be the way to go, and they're very adamant on that. And there are a lot of people that are completely against it and want to bootstrap and don't want to take that external perspective. So I think it really depends on the kind of person you are, and and which direction you go based on that. I mean, I'm like, it's obviously malleable, and like, people can change, and like, people that are bootstrapped might eventually want investment. But I think, at least in the start, or there are a few that are very like headstrong on each direction. But yeah, something from Samyak's episode. We spoke a lot about like spirituality in that episode as well.
It was a slightly dark episode too, I think.
We spoke a lot about non-business things in that. And one thing that was really interesting to me is that when you're manifesting, you should or if you believe in manifesting, you should believe in manifesting the essence of something you want rather than a thing. So it's more about the feeling or how you're going to feel after getting that versus just getting that.
Yeah.
And that way you leave room to the universe for variability, for things to work out in the way they should. So yeah, if it's like wanting a particular thing, you, instead of saying you want that, you rather say that you want the feeling that you would get from getting that, and then what you actually get might be completely different, but you get that feeling at the end of the day. So I think that was really interesting, and I've heard a lot about manifesting, and I've never heard that perspective, but I really appreciate that, because yeah, it makes sense, right? Like when you think about it,
yeah,
why want something or wish for something particular? Well, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, you want to feel happy, or you want to feel content, or you want that feel of stability, whatever that is, like that's the goal, right? It's not like making 5 lakhs, 50 lakhs, 5 crores.
Whatever achieves that goal. And even if your goal is making 50 crores, it could be any idea, it could be any deal that could make that happen. It doesn't have to be the single thing that you're thinking of in that moment.
I think, it also gives ability to get something better, right? Like for you, you might be like, oh yeah, I want 50 lakhs, but you could get way more.
Yeah, I think it's just about having just changing the form of your expectation, so that what you're working towards is not like one thing. You're just working towards success, in whatever shape it comes. Yeah, coming to Sanchit, who is the founder of Pascare, he is an entrepreneur that, his reason for being an entrepreneur is that he wanted to create exponential value, not just for himself, but also in the people around him. So that's what he said, is like the moment you're an entrepreneur, you're playing a larger role in other people's lives. And Sir Martin Sorrell, actually, I don't know if it's still up, but I remember 2 years ago, the S4 Capital website said that they employ, I think it was 3,000 people, but they're responsible for 8,000. So they took a average figure of how many people each employee supports, and they said, so they employ 3,000, but they're responsible for 8,000. And it was just a very interesting thought that never occurred to me, is that as a business, if you employ 10 people, you're actually directly affecting the livelihoods of a lot more than just 10 people.
Yeah, everyone that depends on them or their family, even if it's not necessarily financial dependency, but it's also mood plays such an important role, right? So if your work culture is bad, you're impacting that person's behavior, which in turn impacts their behavior.
Exactly.
So even tiny things like that people might not put too much thought into adds up. Yeah, and then we had Ashay, and the cool thing he did was he worked at Shebang before, and then he kind of had a competitor, even though they had a different niche to it, but it was starting something that you already were a part of.
Yeah.
So that was cool as well. And something that he said was internships at a smaller company is sometimes better than internships at a bigger company. And I feel at least when I was applying for internships, you try and go for the name, right? You want that name on your CV. So that was really interesting to see that it doesn't matter what the name on your CV is, but the experience you get is much better at a smaller company because you're playing multiple hats versus being a small person in a bigger company where you might not get the exposure that you would in a smaller company. So that was a different perspective for people to keep in mind when they're applying for either jobs or internships.
I agree. I think, but there's also the side to it that, when you have a CV, not every time that you apply for a job or send someone that CV, do you have the ability to explain that part? So how much of you can articulate it on your CV that, hey, I worked at a smaller company, but I did a lot more. Yeah, as well as you can articulate it, that's when you get the value. But, if you're just putting down the items into a list, I think the name does help. If you've worked at a Big 4 or Big 3, it does help to have that brand attached to it. Second part of it is whether you're a founder. The day you become founder, you can essentially stop working on your CV. And Asha is obviously a founder now, so he's not he doesn't need to think about the CV side of it as much, and maybe that's why he was more able to think about the actual value from that internship.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think again, there are pros and cons to both aspects. I think even if you're a founder, it gives a level of credibility if you work at a bigger company.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, he founded this, but he used to work at company X. So I'm not saying that, okay, like having that like is going to be at a detriment.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, fine, if you work at a smaller company, maybe it doesn't show well on your CV, but the skills you learn will be way better than what it would have been at a larger company. So just pure experience-wise. Maybe like you're adding CV to it complicates things a little, but pure experience-wise, I think, again, it's very variable. It really depends on what company, which industry, and like everything in between that. But I think if we had to generalize it, it would maybe be somewhere like that. Again, I think it really depends on the kind of person you are as well. Because like if someone is very proactive, they're going to try and get the best of anything wherever they are.
Yeah. Coming to Saiyam, so he's the founder of A2 Organics, and they kind of are e-commerce or like delivery for dairy products. And he never said this, but what I took from his episode was there is no task, no job, no role that is too little for an entrepreneur to perform. So he used to do deliveries by himself, and in fact, doing one of those deliveries is where he met his investor. So, going back to what Swapan said about having like spreading your wings wide and doing like multiple roles by time, right opportunity. Like just linking those two things to me is just like amazing to see that no job is too little. And just again, Deliveroo, the founder does deliveries. I think we spoke about that during the episode. I can't remember, but again, the same thing, right? So you can be a founder, but at the end of the day, you should be able to perform any role that the business requires that you can't or haven't hired for.
Yeah, I guess like one small segue to like the Deliveroo part of thing. I think what I found really interesting about that was, even though he's the founder of Deliveroo, which is like the biggest delivery for food in the UK, what he said was that you have to be close to what your service is. Because he was like, the only way I can solve for a problem is if I know what is actually happening. And I think that was really interesting. So like, even though you have grown and you don't need to be in the day-to-day activities, you have to be there to see where your company is going, because that's where it is at, not where you are sitting. So like, that was really interesting. And then, again, there's no role that's too small or too big for an entrepreneur or the founder of the company. So yeah, that was the thing. And then we had Adi and Mac, who are the founders of Wednesday and Tuesday. And what was interesting in their episode was that if your roles are well defined, there is no need for micromanagement. And I think a lot of companies can learn from that.
Yeah.
There is a lot of micromanagement around the world in India. And I feel like, again, if we take it from the Gen Z perspective, a lot of Gen Z do not like micromanagement.
Yeah, not at all. We prefer like autonomy.
Yeah.
Like we like to fall, make mistakes, do it ourselves. Maybe we're a little arrogant, who knows? But yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, and he also said that like he has expertise because he was an engineer, but he doesn't get involved in that aspects of the business because he trusts the team to do that.
Yeah.
I feel like I guess that's another thing, right? You give the person autonomy to do it, they feel the responsibility for it and will execute correctly. And then they don't require the micromanagement. But if there is someone on your head 24/7, you're gonna also think that they're gonna fix it if there's something wrong. So you're not gonna take that responsibility too seriously. So I get that.
And you don't have like any kind of you don't end up allowing that person to grow. So like you will be responsible for that person for the rest of the time there. And again, company won't run without you then. Because how will that person ever take the responsibility? Speaking of company won't run without you. So the Hamish Blythe, I said, I want to get to this later, is for Sari, who is the founder of Photon. And so it's a photography company again. I think they focus a lot on they work with restaurants, weddings, multiple different things. What Sari said was, as a freelancer, you hit a roadblock because your earnings are limited by your time. That's what I was coming back to, is that taxi driver analogy, Sajal's business, all of it is that if she can only sell 16 hours a day of her time, then as much as she can charge per hour is the only way she can grow. But as a business, there's like no end to it. And that's what I took away is that, how much can your business depend on you? And when you're a freelancer working in like an artistic industry, that part of it is so much more true. And it's so much tougher to break out of.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where it's like difficult for professionals, right? Like, a lot of it is based on their skill. And okay, there's limited time. So how do you make sure that you can earn from that skill without the time being attached to it? It is tricky, but I mean, they've done a great job for it. So
100%, yeah.
So yeah, then moving on to Yatharth, who is the founder of Rostrum Education. He does education counseling for people that want to go to Ivy Leagues, the top universities in the UK, and yeah, essentially help students go to their dream university. And something that what he emphasized on and said really well was that at the leadership level of people in your company, you have to give them the feeling that they are going to grow when the company grows.
Yeah.
And also compensate them accordingly. Because a lot of what we've said is like, as an employee, we don't get the benefit of when the company grows, or the effort we put in, we don't get reciprocated the same way. And it's important to be able to compensate the employees that are putting in all their effort and all their like sweat and tears into building your company for you. Like, how do you respect them? And he said also that when you find these people, keep them close and don't lose them, because it's very difficult to find these people and then really retain these people. So that was really interesting to see that, okay, you have to find that best talent and compensate them well and then keep them as well.
Yeah, it's again what Talented has done as well. Like, they've got PG&G are the founders, but then they've got a founding team who all have ESOPs, paid well, all of that. Yeah, I think it's just about how much can you look beyond your own thing and create that exponential value. Yeah, coming to Vipul, who spoke quite directly about this. So Vipul's the founder of Mugafi, which is short like music, games, and films. It's again AI-based tech platform, but the core of it is helping people tell their story in different so screenwriters taking their stories to the big screen, artists, other artists, just kind of boosting them in different ways. So what he said was incremental increases in your salary don't change your life. A large certain increase does, and vice versa. So he put a few numbers to it, but I think what I took away from this is that even for me, because I don't differentiate that much between my salary and the business as a family business owner, which is not the right way to look at it always. But in the last 2 years itself, the business has seen like a large upturn and downturn in terms of like revenue plus cash flow problems and all of those things. Like, it's quite volatile. But what I've noticed is my lifestyle doesn't change at all. And I think that's again because even then the large increase and decrease is not to a point which is going to really change the course of the business. And I think what the learning I've taken away from all of this is to just kind of be more patient and consider that sudden upshifts and downshifts are part of life. When there's a really large one is when you need to really act on it. Until then, nothing really changes.
Yeah, and he said that you can get stuck in that corporate ladder, right? Wanting more, but that difference is not that much. It's going from I think he said 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs, but that's not, or 15 lakhs.
50,000 to 5 lakhs, and then 5 lakhs to 50 lakhs, is what he said the difference was.
Yeah, so again, making that movement as an employee is not going to change your life that drastically. Whereas, even if you take that cut for a bit, where you're trying to build something but you don't have that income, you can live, because the future ahead is way brighter than what it would be. But again, saying that, it can fail.
It can go both ways, 100%.
But then we had Anuscha on, who was the co-founder of Sobti, which is a buy now, pay later fintech company. And she said that it's not about the resources when we talk about banks versus fintech. And I think that was really interesting. Like whatever company you're starting, it doesn't matter if someone has more resources than you have. The importance comes in the execution and the differentiation you bring. And I think that was really interesting because you can also take this into different situations. And like she was speaking about it in terms of banks having more resources and data versus starting a fintech company doesn't necessarily have as much historic data. But when you also talk about it in terms of resources like money, for example, it again it will help. But at the end of the day, I think the differentiation and the execution of the way you build your company makes a massive difference. So even if person A has more resources on paper versus person B, if person B is doing a much better job of executing that company, it's going to be way better than what person A will be able to. Now, if person A has more resources and the execution, then that's obviously like best case scenario. But I think if it's either or, that's important because a lot of people might think they don't have enough resources and hence aren't able to do something. But that's not a barrier.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what again leads to acquisitions, which is just like if you're a large company and there's someone out there who has taken part of your business and is doing it slightly better, that's when you just go and acquire them and you've got that like competency in your company as well. After that we had Aditi Banerjee of Magic Billion. So she's working on taking talent from India and giving them the right opportunities outside of India. Again, great thing she mentioned was don't raise just because you can. And there she said she also spoke about the difference in context for herself versus her father, where like her father's at a stage in life where he wants to like build quick.
Just to mention, her father was a co-founder as well.
Her father's a co-founder. And so he's at a stage in life where he wants to obviously build quicker. He's done it many times before. He knows what's needed, and kind of like not to put it crudely, but doesn't have as many years in his career left as she does. And then like she's of the opinion to like build more organically, slowly, get to a particular stage where the vision and mission are as per what she wants, and then raise so that never changes. And I think for me, what I took away from this was literally everything, because I also work with my father, even though he's the founder and I'm just working with him, but like he sees me as his equal, and that's what they have in like their thing as well. So she spoke about trust going a long way, different contexts, like all of those things just applies to me directly. So this was a very personal learning that I took from her episode.
Yeah, and it was also interesting to see how risk appetite changes, right, across your career. Like again, I think right now we would have a higher risk appetite because we're still early on in our career, so we're able to make that change or take that break or try something. But I feel like when you reach that in-between stage in your career is when like your risk appetite declines a little, where I guess responsibilities become a little more.
Funnily enough, in the case of my father and I, it's opposite. He is a lot more risk-taking than I am.
Yeah, exactly. But then afterwards, it again gets risk-taking, like the way maybe. So it's like that dip.
I think you become a risk taker again when your dependents aren't dependent on you anymore. Yeah.
So it's like your life trajectory and how that changes.
Yeah.
Then we had Mayank, who is the co-founder of Even, a healthcare insurance company, and we spoke a lot about the industry as well. But I think one thing that was important was, again, I think a lot of conversations that we've had have included a lot to do with work culture and the importance of that. And I think even he really focused on that while building Even. They initially wanted to be the best company to work for in India, and then they switched to being the company where people do their best work. And I think that was very interesting to see that switch, but also to be a company where people do their best work.
Yeah.
And that means that you're giving the people working at your company the ability to do that, the space to do that. The work culture supports that. And I think all of that was integrated in that one phrase. So I think it's something that a lot of companies should inspire to be, right? Like everyone should create a culture where you are creating a company where people are going to do their best work, where people are coming in to give all the time and effort to because they believe in that idea and they are well supported in executing that, because I think that's where the difference lies sometimes. Because the problem might be something that I want to solve or people want to solve, but if you're not supported correctly, then that's where that friction lies.
100%. And I think the main thing he said was that for every person there's a different idea for the best places to work. So just changing that perspective as a company and then also as an employee, thinking not that this is the best company to work for, but if I go here, I'll have the right support I need, that I need personally to do my best work. Yeah, that's what I guess was his point. Coming to Vishal, so Vishal is again kind of similar position to Aditi, but I don't think his focus is as much India to abroad with talent as it is just giving people the right skill sets to find.
Yeah, for him it was more of taking talent from small cities
and
bringing them to the metro and giving them the ability to start at the same place someone in a big city would start with, giving them that skills.
So Vishal is a salesperson, which he said very succinctly many times during the episode. But to be honest, when we even asked him about his sales methodology and everything, he had a whole 3-point list and very articulately ready to go and anything. But the one point I took away from that, which is very important, is that your sales methodology must capture the benefit to the singular person you're reaching out to at the organization and not the organization as a whole. Which, where if you're speaking to a CFO, hey, look for the revenue side of things, is there some kind of benefit you're giving them there? Versus if you're speaking to the CMO, are you giving them some kind of a brand boost, marketing boost, what is it? And I think that to me made a lot of sense, because any business, if it's giving benefits to another business, is multiple different types of benefits. So you need to really cater your pitch to the person you're reaching out to and not just the organization.
Yeah, I think this also ties back to your cold calling part, right? Personalization is so important. And when you're cold calling, you're doing it in terms of the numbers game, but your cold calling can be more effective when you personalize it just a little. So being able to have that where it resonates with someone on the other side, that's what you're trying to tickle, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
But then we spoke to Madhuri, who was the founder of Lux Change, and it was a marketplace for pre-owned luxury items. So she previously had a company in the same space with a different name, and
it was exactly the same, by the way. It was exactly the same company.
Which is and it's crazy how that, I guess, didn't do well or as well as the Lux Change did. And I think that was the importance she gave to choosing the correct name for your business. It doesn't have to be fancy. And the reason being, you wanted to reach a large crowd. And for that, it has to be hard-hitting and clear and as clear as possible. Because it needs to be easy for people to share with their other friends.
Yeah.
So it needs to be direct, it needs to be crisp, and it needs to be easy for people to remember. You might have a really nice meaning to your name, but if it's not easy, it's not going to spread, because as we know, marketing is a lot to do with word of mouth. So
it's still crazy that businesses like Zomato have done so well, because again, Zomato had that entire marketing campaign of whether it's Zomato, Zomato, and that itself made them more viral than they already are. And they have an insane marketing team, but again, it's not a very direct name. Zomato doesn't mean food delivery app. You might not even link it to food unless you think of tomato.
But I think it's
so that's the other side of things. It is easy to say.
Yeah.
It is easy to share. But again, that's what I mean. It's a fine balance of.
It's a fine balance. I don't think it necessarily needs to be the meaning of the thing, but I think the crispness of the name is important.
Yeah.
Or whether it's easy to say, or whether it's easy for any person to say. Obviously they were targeting people that can afford luxury, but just brands in general, it's okay, regardless of your education, regardless of where you are in life, you're able to say and you're able to talk about that company. I think that's I guess the goal for most companies.
100%. So coming to Fatema, she's the founder of Andhra PR. public relations company, and I think they work a lot with fintech. Is the current niche, at least, that unless she expands. But so she spoke about the imposter syndrome of being like an older founder. So she's in her 30s, and to me,
which is ridiculous to think that's like an older founder now.
Exactly, yeah. And so like when I was at Deloitte, I had like all the analysts used to talk about like imposter syndrome 24/7. In fact, our onboarding like training had imposter syndrome and like how to deal with it in it. And so like you think about, hey, when you're 30, do you still feel that no matter what you're doing? Like, do you still feel it? And like just to see that you do is actually nice, because like I've always assumed that imposter syndrome is something I'm going to be feeling for the rest of my life. But to a certain extent, it's also what puts me in a mindset to like learn from everyone around me, no matter what they're doing. Like, whether their business is like a small business or like an MNC, is to just learn from what they are doing and like basically taking the good, let go of the bad. So that's how I deal with my imposter syndrome. So if I still have it at the age of 30, I'll be happy, because that means I'm still in a learning state of mind.
Yeah, that's a nice spin to put on it, because I think like, yeah, it's not the easiest to deal with imposter syndrome. So it's kind of sad that like it never goes, but like it's nice to like think about it in a way that okay, if you still have it, that means you're still growing and learning. Because I feel like like that's right. A lot of times you feel that because you feel you're not capable of doing something in that space, given that you're so early on. So I think it also means that you're not getting comfortable, like you're always trying something new. So yeah, that's been, I guess, it's all about perspective, and I think that's a great perspective to have.
Exactly,
in that sense. But yeah, then we had Akanksha and Caitlin, who were the founders of Backdrop, and they again, like I guess back to like the investor not caring about just the product but the people was repeated here. Akanksha got into YC, and they just cared about who she was as a founder. And like when we asked her what YC saw, she didn't mention the product at all. And if I'm right, I think they didn't have a proper product at that point in time.
Definitely not the idea for Backdrop. Like if anything, she would have had something else.
Yeah. So again, that shows how investors care more about you as a person versus what you're building, because at the end of the day, it's you who they have to work with versus like the idea, because at the end of the day, it's ever growing, evolving. It depends on your demand, it depends on your market, and it's not the be all end all. Like every business grows and pivots. So I think that was again nice to reiterate that it was more to do with the founder, and that was the same that Ahana also experienced. And again with YC, the idea that she actually applied with got declined. Like she was only accepted based on who she was.
Exactly.
And YC gave her a week to find another idea, which again like shows that it doesn't, like it's you and the skills you have that's more important than anything else. And then another thing that Caitlin did was the willingness to take risks, and that's, I guess, the underlying definition of an entrepreneur. She had dependents, she had like a baby, and she gave up a well-paying job.
She was at PayPal, so she was definitely being
in the tech part of things.
She was at Honey or PayPal, whatever. A good corporate job.
A good corporate job in the tech side of things, so she was making a lot. So to be able to give that up when you have dependents, to start something of your own, I guess that's like the true definition, and that's a massive sacrifice when you're in that stage of life. So I think that was, I guess, even inspiring, because like it's like, okay, if someone in that position can do something like that to build something that they feel so passionately towards, when you don't have dependents and you want to do something, what's stopping you? So,
I mean, if you don't have dependents but you have the passion for an idea, what is really stopping you? Coming to Emily, who is founder of Sonder & Tell, they are, I think, a brand strategy consultancy more than anything else. So again, she came from a business wherein, like the advertising side of things, And like again, there you do have your name attached to everything. So like if you're a copywriter, you do want to see credits when you win an award and stuff like that. So she spoke a lot about what it means to build a business without your name attached to it. And again, talking about the continuity of the business, talking about where you are, where your personal brand does creep in a lot. And I guess she is the other side of things where you don't want it to be like your name on it. So like even if you take Ogilvy, which is one of the largest advertising agencies in the world, it is named after David Ogilvy. Like he did start it, so he is the one who led it. And so yeah, it was just interesting to see why she chose not to go with her personal branding attached to it, and yeah, how that plays out is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I think there's also, it really depends on the kind of company you're growing and the kind of founder you are when you're thinking about attaching your personal brand to it. Because a lot of people that we've spoken throughout is they also focus on making sure the company runs without them.
Yeah.
Which means it's not necessarily attached to their brand. They want the company to work in the future without them. Regardless of whether they are involved in the day-to-day, they want that seamless transition. So I think it's like, yeah, the start, it's always interesting to have like your personal brand attached, but I think like the eventual goal for most people would be to have like that sense of differentiation where it's attached in terms of legacy, but it can run day on day without you.
Yeah, I think it almost becomes passive income at that point, and that's like anyone's goal is passive income.
Yeah, that's the dream. But yeah, then our final online guests were the founders of Crow Club. And it was the first time we had 4 co-founders on our episode. And they have a subscription company for bicycles for children. And we had them on, and it was interesting to see how 4 co-founders work together and the different roles they each played. So I guess when you have 4 co-founders, it is important to have roles that are well defined and have that 5-year vision and plan ahead so that everyone's on the same page and are working towards the same goal. Because again, there are 4 different opinions to take. There are 4 people to be on, to agree on one thing. And I think one thing that they said was that because of how well defined their roles were, they didn't necessarily need all 4 to be on the same page because it was given to that one person to take that.
As long as the company was heading in the right direction, they don't question each other's key areas.
Which is I don't think it's that common. It's difficult to put.
It's very tough. It's very tough.
To put put all your trust in those 3 other people to make decisions for your company as well. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how they I think trust is at the core of it, and to be able to do that. So I guess it also comes from they had that friendship before they started something. So I guess they had some level of trust.
Yeah.
But it was really nice to see how they did that.
So there you have it, 40 entrepreneurs, 40 learnings.
Yeah, we've learned quite a bit through 40, I guess, people. And I think what was interesting was there were very few things that were repeated across the episodes. I mean, there were obviously those main things about investors, about personal brand, about being the continuity of your company without you and the dependency on you. And I would say those 3 were the main ones that were potentially repeated. But I think overall, every person that we've spoken to has shared a different insight.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing to see because the themes that were repeated apply to anyone, and ideally any entrepreneur wherever they are in the world. So it's kind of just nice to know that there are multiple people that feel that way.
Yeah, and it's cool to see that every person shares a different thing from their journey, and I think that's what we want to get right. From every person that we speak to, we want to be able to learn something that they do differently compared to the others, and then try and apply that to our daily life.
Yeah,
and hopefully others can do the same and like, yeah, learn. Because like, again, I think what we focus on is that these people are not 20, 30 steps further in the game.
Yeah,
they're just a couple of steps ahead of you. So it is easy to like use what they are doing in your daily life because you know that it's worked for people just a couple of steps ahead.
Yeah, and like what their context is not like so far off from yours that like nothing they say, like you can resonate with a lot of what these founders talk about, even as an early stage founder. But yeah, I mean, thank you for watching. Hopefully, if you watch the episodes, you have some same learning, some different ones. And
I guess, yeah, let us know if there's any particular learning from any of the episodes that you think you were able to apply to your life.
And then, as usual, like, comment, share, subscribe.
Thank you, and see you all in the next episode.